All right, I want to get into now the Reds. Okay? It, seemingly for a couple of weeks anyway, people talking about should they be a buyer or a seller at the deadline. I will start with my opinion and turn it over to you two. I say they do nothing, is my opinion. Now, if something fell in front of you where you'd be stupid not to do it, okay. But here's the way I look at it, right? They allegedly are going to get some of these guys back who have been injured. Marte is going to start to hit sooner or later. I'm not worried about that. So he'll be your third baseman, Elliott short. They keep saying McLean. You've heard me say all along, I don't think McLean plays for him this year, but they keep saying he will, so I'm going to say, okay. McLean becomes your second baseman. India, who's been your second best player all year long, becomes your DH. Candelario at first. Steer. Friedel comes back, and they say he'll be back within the next 10 to 12 days. He's in center. And now you got this Reese Hines kid who's tearing it up. Now, we know that's not going to last forever. We know that. But for right now, he's your answer for the big bat you didn't have in your lineup, right? Okay. I'm not going to do anything because for them to be 3 games under 500 with all of the injuries and all of the players they are missing, I would think they are going to be better in the second half. The only thing that worries me is something you may remember that I talked about from the very beginning of the year, and that is based on the number of innings their starters in the rotation this year threw last year, or more accurately, didn't throw last year. I do get very concerned that once they get into late August, early September, they're going to have to start shutting guys down even if they're healthy. Because Lodolo didn't pitch at all last year. He is on a serious innings count for this year. Green, you're not going to bump him more than 20% from last year. He still doesn't get to 200 innings. Abbott, we saw him run out of steam last year when they extended him. Now, he'll have a chance to go a little further along because he was extended last year. And then the rest of the rotation right now is a mess because of injuries. I say they do nothing, and let's just see what happens.
Yeah, I honestly hate to agree with you for the sake of the show, but I feel the same way. I mean, if you look at it in numerous different perspectives, if you have a double breaker putt in golf and you don't know what to do, you hit it right at the hole and you ride it out.
Yep.
If you have a decent hand in poker, you definitely aren't betting, you definitely aren't folding. You're just kind of riding it out. And I think there's a lot of uncertainties in that aspect for the Reds. Is Matt McLean ever going to come back? Is this one of those things that's where it's another month? There's obviously no Marte in the playoffs. And like you said, the biggest thing that nobody's really talking about is, are these starting pitchers who have had a heck of a year and quite honestly kept the Reds in playoff talk at this point in the season as we're headed into the All-Star break, are they going to be able to do this consistently for the next 60 games, let alone stay healthy and continue producing good, solid innings? I think you ride it out. If you get your guys back and you go on another run, then heck, you could find your way into a playoff spot. But at the end of the day, if you don't know, the worst thing you can do is go out and buy, and then the other parts of your team that have helped you all year, those crumble apart, and then you're left with nothing come the next 2 to 3 years. I think the Reds have a really bright future, and ride out the second half of the season or our last 60 games and see what happens.
I don't know if they have a bright future or not, but I just feel like that they're going to be better in the second half. Reed, now you are a Cubby guy, an admitted Cubby guy.
I am.
The only team in the division behind the Reds in the standings.
Thanks for the reminder.
No problem. It's a half-game difference, by the way, so what the hell's the difference? What do you think the Reds ought to do?
So when I think of the Reds, I think buying is off the table. I think buying is completely off the table.
Fair.
Because I don't think that there's any piece that gets them, for sure into the playoffs. I don't think you can bring in some bat and all of a sudden this team's going to win 86, 87 games. I don't think that's possible. But I do think that there are some valuable assets that have great value that you can get something out of in the bullpen. Fernando Cruz, he's a 34-year-old relief pitcher that's having a really good year. He's got swing and miss stuff. He's got one of the best pitches in the league in his split finger. I think you can trade him for pieces. But here's the problem with trading relievers like that is you don't bring a whole lot back.
That's right, you don't.
You don't bring a whole lot back, but you do have an opportunity to bring something back for a reliever that's honestly, he didn't come up to the major leagues till he was 32 years old. And now he's going to throw in probably 75 games. Who knows what he's going to be next year?
There's no
Ian
doubt.
Jabot threw 75, 80 games last year, and he hasn't pitched a single inning for the
That's
Reds
right.
this year because he was overused. So I think you trade a Fernando Cruz. I think you can get some value out of the bullpen to sell those pieces. But for the most part, I think you just sit. Because the one big question mark is Jonathan India. What do you do with Jonathan India?
Now, see, that is the big question.
Because he's having the best year, and that's including his Rookie of the Year campaign. He's having his best year.
Yep.
People will pay for Jonathan India. You got one more year with him, I believe.
Yep.
I think
Under a contract. He signed a 2-year, $8 million deal, and then you'd have another year after that before he could hit free agency.
So what do you do with Jonathan India? And I think you just stay put. If this was last year and Jonathan India's having the year, I think you trade him.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have Matt McClain, you have Noel Marte, you have all these pieces, you have Edwin Arroyo coming up and all these things that you can comfortably say, hey, it's okay if we lose Jonathan India, and let's trade him when he's at the highest value that he's ever had in a year in which no one's going to be trading because everyone feels like they're still in it.
Yep.
But here we are the next year, and you still have a lot of question marks, so I'm not comfortable trading away Jonathan India based off the performance he's having this year.
I agree 100% on that.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable either, Reed, because baseball, I've never heard the word prospect get used more, and for good reason. You know, you're drafting kids out of high school that are going to play in the minor leagues for years before they get an opportunity. But especially as a Reds fan in a small market team, yes, you have to draft well and you have to have a good major league pipeline. And how often do these quote-unquote top prospects actually pan out?
No doubt about it.
And Jonathan India, you can call it fluke this year, but he is on a tear right now, and he is looking like he is going to pan out. So if you're going to have a good minor league system, I think you got to hold on to the guys that are actually producing for you, because at what point does that mean anything? If you're a Reds fan, you're going to pride yourself on drafting well and having good young talent because that's the way you're going to win, and you finally have it through 100 games of the season. Now you're going to say, would it be fair, we're the Reds, India wasn't great last year, let's just get rid of him. What happens if Marte decides to be no good? Because he hasn't shown anything about being good outside of 3 weeks last season. What happens if Matt McClain isn't the same when he comes back from injury? We're looking around next year after the first 30 games. Reds could be 10 games under 500. We're saying, geez, Jonathan India, we dealt him and he hit 20 bombs, going second half of the season into the playoffs, turning the corner, and he's really developing as a 27-year-old. Yeah, the infield might not be great, but India could be moved to the designated hitter if Matt McClain comes back next year.
Yeah, and he's still a guy that's capable, while not playing them necessarily very well on defense, he is a guy that's capable of being moved around, and he's already accepted it. India would be the tricky one. But I agree with both. Look, on this program last year, I was saying that they needed to make a deal to try and get to the playoffs last year because they had all their young guys playing, healthy, whole deal. And you'll remember we also said on the program that year 2, no guarantee, all bets are off. And let's be honest about it. The only guy in year 2 who's been a player this year, position player, has been Ellie. Everybody else are either suspended or hurt or taking a step backwards. Steer looked like he was on track for a monster year. You've never been a big Steer guy.
Nope.
He's taken a major step back. Friedel's been out all year. Who knows? Fraley, now he's not a young player. But, he hadn't hit a home run in 2 months. 3 months. Encarnacion Strand hurt. Marte suspended. McClain hurt. So there's no guarantee that all these guys are going to be great next year. That's why when you say their future is bright, I don't know if it's bright or not. It might be, but it might not be. I don't know.